Hi everyone, and welcome to Comfortable Lies. I am Harry Felker, and here is proper Ganderize. You may remember a long time ago, if you're my age or older, when you would watch news media, read papers, they would just report what happened and let you decide based on factual information, the factual information available, what to think about it. And sadly, that's not the case anymore. Media in general. We have to understand that in this day and age, with technology, media has become a public platform and not so much a platform with a financial gate attached to it. What that really means is that just about anybody can come online and spew any amount of information or lack thereof and seem legitimate. I know anybody who happens to be watching this is already consuming something that may or may not seem legitimate right now. Hi. So the problem is that when we consume media, we're no longer consuming just facts. We're consuming the person who's translating that media, their interpretation of the facts, their opinions about the facts, their political beliefs, their religious beliefs, their socio-economical beliefs. All of those things are package deal to media at this point because journalism isn't journalism anymore. The overwhelming amount of media out there allows for confirmation bias, and I'm sure most of the people who are watching this agree with a lot of the things that I say and therefore are confirming their biases based on what I'm saying. But the same holds true for if you're watching Rachel Maddow, if you're watching Tucker Carlson or any of those other corporate media figureheads, as well as if you're watching super secret video that YouTube takes down every 5 days. When you're looking for media, you're looking for media that confirms your bias, and that's not necessarily your fault. You were kind of trained to do that, but I will get on that later. What we have witnessed with this opening of media, and this is something that's been steadily and more often happening, is something I like to call hoax pressing. And what hoax pressing is that you take an idea that you know isn't true, or you have no way of proving it to be true, so if you're a skeptic, you automatically go, well, this isn't true because I don't have any proof. But something that someone really wants to believe is true, and you push that narrative, and much like propagandists of the past that will remain nameless, along with his organization, because that gets things taken off of YouTube, you tell a lie, a big enough lie often enough, and it becomes the truth. And that's one of the many things that we're facing today in the media consumption problem that American citizens and probably most of the world has. If you have access to technology, this is probably something that's happening to you as well. Just because you're not from America doesn't mean you can't be a dumb fuck. Americans don't have the monopoly on dumbfuckery. Sorry. First off, I'd like to talk about journalism, and I mentioned earlier about how journalism used to be reporting facts and then allowing the viewer to discern whether or not it's true. There's a ton of memes going around, and memes are a form of journalism that support this. Remember when you used to watch the news and it would tell you the facts, and you could decide whether or not how you felt about it. And nowadays you watch the news and they tell you how they feel about the facts, and you get to decide whether or not they're actually true. This isn't necessarily a, oh, we're going to deny facts type of problem. It's a, we can't really trust corporate media or mainstream media sources to tell us the truth, because they are literally in bed with the people that they're supposed to be reporting on, and obviously they are not doing that job. It's more of a business. How do we sell our product? How do we sell ad space? How do we get people to watch our program as opposed to other programs? And one of the tools that they use is sensationalism. Sensationalism is everything from this is the most important election of our lifetime, to using statistics and adding an emotional content to something that necessarily isn't true, because numbers are easily manipulated. There's a whole laundry list of things that we can talk about how the media is deceptive. The media can manipulate statistics to make problems seem much bigger than they are, much smaller than they are. They can use rigged polls, and you don't have to rig a poll by just not adding people who took the poll or subtracting people who took the poll that you don't agree with. You can just open the poll up to only people that you agree with. And we see this on major news websites all the time. We polled 1,000 people, and it just so happened that all the 1,000 people were registered for this party, and this is what they had to say. They don't exhibit any scientific rigor to their statistic making. They use small sample sizes. They use sample sizes from a very directed area. It's even worse than the Family Feud's statistic sampling, and that was a game show. That should tell you something right there. There is a lot of political pandering that happens within the media. Every journalist has a political leaning, and they ensure that their political leaning is part of their broadcasting. Their fact reporting has to go through the lens of their political point of view. It's the reason why you see on some stations they're hyper focused against one party, and on other stations they're hyper focused against another party. You'll never really see on mainstream media anyone hyper focused on a third party, and that's also part of this too. The reality is that the media is biased, and the media doesn't seek to rectify that bias but exacerbate it, and that's a problem. And now, here's a word from our sponsor.
Are you sick of 2020 coming at you with disaster after disaster, crisis after crisis? Do you feel that your life is just a complete waste of chaos? Why don't you bring purpose to your life by joining a cult? Cthulhu, the cult that gives you purpose.
I'd like to thank our sponsor for these great words. I'm sure happy I got to hear it. The root of this problem, the root cause of this, is honestly the education system. And this is a worldwide problem. Government-run education systems have a fail-safe for dealing with problematic people. And when I say problematic, I don't mean problematic to society, I mean problematic to the government in and of itself. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand that children are not trained how to think, they are trained what to think. They are trained to be obedient, they are trained in such a way that it makes the gradual progression of the degradation of media an inevitability. One way to look at it is a few years ago there was a test from the late 19th century, early 20th century, posted all over the internet about, this is a common middle school, grade school test, and a lot of the questions were things people couldn't answer and were not taught. During my lifetime, I've seen the closing of civics class, I've seen the closing of home economics, where we were not only taught how to cook and sew, but we were also taught how to balance a checkbook and pay bills and budgets and things like that. All of these things were completely erased from the education system. And that's the feature as far as the government is concerned, not a flaw. Because if you're independent and if you can take care of yourself, then you don't need a government. And it's something that most people who were born in my generation have understood, is that we don't need people to take care of us. We can take care of ourselves. We can organize with other people at our discretion and disassociate from people who do not meet our needs or do not have positive relationships with us. That's something that the boomers before us didn't know, because they had stay-at-home moms, and it's something the millennials and post-millennials didn't know, because they had a government school system that was basically another parent. We kind of were stuck in this situation where after school was over, you were just cut loose, and if parents weren't home, because for most of us parents weren't home, we were left to fend for ourselves. The term latchkey kid is talking about us, not about anybody else. We were the generation that, if we were really paying attention, we were the generation that saw the slow degradation of the education system. We were the last groups of students that had budgeting, had paying taxes, had civics classes. They didn't exist. When I had graduated, a lot of the elective courses for self-sustainability, understanding and operating in the system that you were going to be forced into once you left school, all of those classes were all taken away. They had all disappeared. And it wasn't budget cuts to education, it was by design. We as a people could not be trained to be independent and live without, financial aid or governments to control other people. It's the reason why whenever anyone asks me about anarchism and I tell them, well, government and police are shit, and they go, well, you're fine, but what about other people? What about other people? Going back to mainstream media and the use of propaganda, regardless of the legal status of it, it is rubber stamp authorized by the government, because no one at the government is willing to stop it, since it's propaganda in its benefit. Perfect example, the slander job done to the Branch Davidians. Earlier this year in 2020, Netflix had a documentary about what happened with the Branch Davidians, and oddly enough, nobody understood what what anyone was talking about. That's how good the hack job was. The accusations of sexual assault of minors, of bigotry, of David Koresh having a harem of women and just raping all of them. All of that was media slander. It was propaganda, which then allowed the American public to turn a blind eye to the human rights violations that were perpetuated by the federal government. Ruby Ridge, Randy Weaver, who by all means, a white separatist. He did not want to live around black people. We don't need to sugarcoat that part of the story. He was a white separatist. He was who he was. He did not seek to subjugate people. He did not seek to send people away. He and his family moved to a place where the conditions were to his liking. And because of that, the federal government attempted to coerce him into being a spy for a white supremacist group, to which he refused, and over a $200 tax stamp that they claimed he owed them, they shot his dog, his son, his wife who was nursing his infant child, and jailed him. I think that's all the ones that, right? Yeah. So, and all the while, the media was focused on the fact that he was a white separatist. Now, I'm not here to defend his racism, but, the fact is that he wasn't actively lynching people. He wasn't actively hurting anybody. He was just looking to leave parts of society out of his life, and that's okay. I mean, you don't have to be a gigantic cross-burning KKK member and be a racist. You can just not want to interact with certain people, and freedom of association is a human right. You can choose to not interact with people. We do this all the time. The fact that his bar is repugnant to many of us, that just means, like, personally, I would not interact with Randy Weaver. I wouldn't buy something from him. I wouldn't sell things to him. I would blacklist him from my my personal interactions, because I don't deal with people like that. But that doesn't mean that I think his dog, his kid, and his wife deserve to be shot by the federal government and then him jailed over a $200 tax stamp that they claimed he owed them. Another perfect example is the Ross Ulbricht case, the Dread Pirate Roberts case, where the federal government basically entrapped a young gentleman into a situation where they claimed he was ordering hits on people via the dark web using cryptocurrency. At that point in time, cryptocurrency was a new thing, and it was painfully obvious that the government was hostile to the implementation of a currency they could not track. And this was really more of a set example type of thing. Yet when we look through the media at any type of instance of this case, all we hear about is how he was selling drugs online and he was ordering hitmen on people online. And that was barely the case. As far as the selling drugs thing, he provided a platform where that was possible. As far as selling drugs online, he had provided an anonymous platform for people to do that. Whether or not he was is unknown, and there is no way to really prove it. The same with ordering a hit. You know, there's words on the internet, but you know what? Not for nothing, I've heard a lot of people on the internet say a lot of things like how they're going to come here and punch me in the face, and my face is here unpunched. Finally, I would like to talk about the media slander of the Bundy and the Bureau of Land Management situation. There are plenty of documentaries out there that actually show both sides of that story. They show some pretty graphic materials of things that the federal government was doing to the Bundys and to their supporters in retaliation to the actions taken by the Bundys. The situation is far less simple than the media let it out to be, but the response of the media to label the Bundys and their supporters as racists, as traitors, as seditionists was wholly untrue and really used to gain support for what the federal government was already prepared to do, which was repeat Waco on a group of people who were just farmers. I understand you may feel certain ways about things, especially considering who the president was at the time, but the fact of the matter is, the last time something like Waco happened, the same party was in power, and we all know that that's not outside the possibility for the federal government to do, obviously. In short, whether or not it's legally allowed or it's sanctioned officially, in short, regardless of legality or official sanction, propaganda is ingrained in our media systems. Whether it be the independent media perpetuating hoaxes and conspiracies that fit their confirmation bias, or large-scale corporate cover-ups of events and slandering of potential quote-unquote troublemakers for the government. And it's something that we've been conditioned as a people to just accept. I would say from the 90s on in education. Reality is, propaganda has been used perpetually on American citizens. Whether it's legal or receives official sanction, it's a fact. From the independent media sources who engage in confirmation bias and report their bias as fact, pushing conspiracies, whether or not they are in fact conspiracies to spread conspiracies, which is a whole other rabbit hole I don't really feel like delving in right now. To mainstream media choosing what to and to not report, what to cover and what not to cover, is endemic in the system. We come from a system that allows for propaganda. Government propaganda has been with us for as long as there has been a government to remember. Propaganda supporting World War II, the U.S. involvement in World War II, and the propaganda against smoking marijuana and the dangers thereof and all the racist connotations that go with that. That all came from the government, and that was all propaganda. Nowadays, it's a little more insidious because it's not the government releasing the propaganda, but it's the government in cahoots with media to ensure that their propaganda gets told as if it were a fact. In the end, as a society goes, we're either going to have to stop allowing this to be the status quo, or we're going to end up falling victim to it. There's no in between. And falling victim to it, all that really means is that your education, your ability to think is going to be attacked on a daily basis, and your children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren are going to live out the prophecy of idiocracy, regardless of who is in office. And it has very little to do with who is on the face of the government, and more to do with the Leviathan that the government is. So here is the comfortable lie. The media outlets hire only the most ethical and morally upstanding citizens to report media, and they only tell you the truth. Their opinions are merely just reflections of that truth. And never in a million years would anyone even consider that they have any type of motive to lie to the public or to spread propaganda in order to sway public opinion or some shit like that.